The bus stop was quiet that morning, just the occasional shuffle of feet and the distant hum of traffic breaking the stillness. Among the handful of people waiting was an elderly woman, hunched slightly under the weight of 2 large handbags. She clutched them tightly, her fingers wrapped firmly around the straps as if afraid to let go. To most, she looked like someone's grandmother, frail, polite, unassuming. But there was something odd about the way the bags moved. They twitched, and every now and then a faint sound emerged, not loud but unmistakable, a whimper. A yelp, quickly muffled. A young man nudged his friend. "Did you see that? Something's moving in her bag." "Probably groceries," his friend replied, shrugging. But the first man kept watching. Then he frowned. "No, that's not groceries, I think she's hiding dogs." Word spread quickly. A woman nearby pulled out her phone and made a call, her voice low but urgent. "Yes, I'm at the bus stop on 5th and Main. There's an old woman here. I think she's smuggling puppies. She has them in bags. It looks strange. You should send someone." 15 minutes later, just as the city bus came into view, a small group arrived on foot. They wore green vests with the logo of a local animal rescue organization. Their faces were calm but serious as they approached the bus stop. The old woman was already moving, shuffling toward the open bus doors. One of the volunteers stepped forward and gently blocked her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said with careful politeness. "We were told you might have animals with you. May we take a quick look inside your bags?" The old woman paused. She looked up at them, her eyes tired but clear, not afraid, not defensive, just calm. She nodded once. Then, in front of the waiting crowd and the now curious passengers on the bus, she slowly unzipped one of the bags. The flap fell back, and the scene it revealed stopped everyone cold. 4 tiny puppies, curled together like a pile of warmth and sleep, blinked up at the sudden light. Their eyes were still blue, their fur soft and patchy. One yawned, showing a pink tongue. Another let out a soft squeak and nuzzled deeper into the blanket lining the bag. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, but no one moved. The volunteers stared, their earlier suspicion replaced with quiet confusion. The old woman looked at them all and smiled gently. "I'm not stealing them," she said softly. "I'm taking them to see their mother." For a moment, no one spoke. It was as if her words needed time to travel through the crowd, settle into understanding. The lead volunteer blinked. "Their mother?" The woman nodded. "Yes, she's waiting for them. She hasn't seen them since yesterday." The puppies wriggled again, one pressing its nose against the soft canvas of the bag as if to search for something it couldn't smell. The bus driver, still holding the door open, looked at the volunteers. "Is there a problem?" The volunteer hesitated. Then, quietly, she shook her head. "No, I think everything is okay." The old woman nodded once more, zipped up the bags gently, and stepped onto the bus. She moved slowly with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. The driver gave her a small nod, as if greeting an old friend. She took her seat, placed the bags carefully on her lap, and looked out the window. The volunteers stood in silence for a moment longer. Then one of them, a young woman named Emily, turned to the group. "I want to know where she's going." Another volunteer raised an eyebrow. "You think something's wrong?" Emily shook her head. "No, but something's not right either. Not in a bad way. I want to understand." She stepped onto the next bus, trailing the old woman from a few rows back, and outside the city carried on, unaware that a quiet act of love was unfolding, one bus ride at a time. The bus rumbled forward, its worn tires humming against the pavement as it carried its passengers away from the city's bustling centre. Emily sat in a seat 3 rows behind the old woman, careful not to stare too long. The 2 large bags rested on the woman's lap like sleeping children, and every so often a tiny movement rustled the fabric. The old woman adjusted the straps gently, as if soothing them. The ride was long, far longer than Emily expected. At each stop, people got off, new ones climbed aboard, but the old woman remained. Her gaze was fixed on the window, not with impatience or boredom, but with quiet anticipation. Her expression carried a kind of practiced calm, like someone who had taken this trip many times before and knew exactly where it would lead. Emily checked her phone. They had been riding for nearly an hour. The city had thinned into suburbs, and now even the neighbourhoods seemed to fade into patches of green and old brick. The sun was rising higher, casting long shadows across overgrown fields and shuttered buildings. Finally, the woman reached up and pulled the stop cord with a firm but gentle tug. The bus slowed. Emily waited until the woman stepped off, then followed at a distance. The woman didn't glance back. She adjusted the bags on her shoulders and walked down a narrow road, cracked and lined with wildflowers that had pushed through the concrete. Her steps were slow, deliberate, and Emily noticed a slight limp in her right leg. Subtle, but there. They walked for nearly 10 minutes, Emily careful to keep her distance but close enough not to lose sight of her. Then the road curved, dipped, and opened into a clearing. What lay ahead didn't look like much. A neglected patch of land ringed by trees, with crumbling stone markers poking up from the earth. An old cemetery, long forgotten. The woman made her way to a shaded corner near a weathered tree. She set the bags down with care, unzipped them and gently lifted each puppy out, placing them on the grass. The tiny dogs wobbled slightly, then began to move with greater purpose, their noses twitching in the air. Then something stirred in the distance. Emily stepped behind a thick tree trunk, her breath catching in her throat. Out from the far side of the cemetery came a figure, thin, limping, covered in dust and matted fur. A large dog, scarred and weary, eyes alert and cautious. It froze when it saw the woman, but then its eyes moved to the puppies. And then it ran. Not gracefully, not quickly, but with an urgency that defied the pain in its injured leg. The puppies squealed with joy. They tumbled forward in a clumsy stampede, crashing into their mother's chest, clambering over her legs, nipping at her ears. The dog lowered herself to the ground, breathing heavily. Her ribs showed through her coat. One of her back legs barely touched the earth. But she licked each pup as if counting them, sniffed their bellies, let them crawl and nurse and squeak. The woman sat on a nearby gravestone, her eyes watching softly. She didn't reach out, didn't call. She just watched, hands folded in her lap. Emily stepped forward, slowly. The woman didn't seem surprised to see her. "I had a feeling you might come," she said. Emily hesitated. "How long have you been doing this?" The woman looked up at the sky. 34 days, every morning. 2 buses and a walk. It's not so bad when you get used to it. "Why here?" "It's quiet, safe, no one comes here, and she feels comfortable." Emily looked at the dog, now lying on her side, while the puppies nursed greedily. The dog's eyes were half closed, her tongue lolled out. She looked exhausted, but content. "Where did you find her?" The woman took a slow breath. "She used to live in a neighborhood near the factory, but they tore everything down, cleared it all. The people left. She didn't." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "She was pregnant when I first saw her," the woman continued. "She wouldn't let anyone near her. People threw things at her to chase her away. Then one day I came, and she was gone. I found her again by accident, hiding behind an old trailer with her babies. She looked like death itself, but she had that look in her eye. You know the one?" Emily nodded. "I brought her food, blankets, sat nearby for hours. She wouldn't come close, but I could see she wanted to. She just didn't know how." The woman's voice was steady, but something in it trembled. "When the workers came and threatened to take her, or worse, I couldn't stand it. So I took the puppies. I thought, if I could keep them safe, maybe she'd follow. Maybe. She'd trust me eventually." Emily looked at the puppies, now curled in a pile around their mother. The dog's eyes watched the old woman from a distance, not with fear, but with recognition. "You're doing something incredible," Emily said quietly. The woman shook her head. "I'm just doing what I'd hope someone would do for me." They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the soft wind in the trees and the rhythmic breathing of a family temporarily whole again. Eventually the woman stood. She moved slowly, carefully, picking up one puppy at a time and placing them gently back into her bags. The mother dog didn't protest. She licked each one goodbye and watched unmoving as the woman zipped up the bags. "She knows," Emily whispered. The woman nodded. "She always knows. I tell her I'll bring them back tomorrow, and I will." As she turned to go, she glanced back at the mother dog, who remained at the edge of the clearing, watching them disappear down the road. Emily followed a few steps behind, the weight of what she had just witnessed pressing heavily on her chest. She no longer had questions, only awe. The next morning, Emily returned to the animal shelter early. She hadn't stopped thinking about the woman or the dogs all night. She asked around. No one knew much about the old woman, just that she was known in the neighbourhood as Granny Lin. She lived alone in a small apartment above a bakery. No family nearby. No car. Just her and apparently a quiet mission that no one had truly noticed until now. Emily couldn't stop replaying the scene at the cemetery, the look in the dog's eyes when she saw her puppies, the calm way Granny Lin sat, letting love do the work words never could. She needed to know more. That afternoon, with a small bag of groceries and a notebook in hand, Emily knocked gently on the door of Granny Lin's apartment. The hallway smelled faintly of yeast and sugar from the bakery below. There were wind chimes hanging from the woman's doorknob, clinking softly in the breeze. It took a moment before the door opened. Granny Lin blinked in surprise, then smiled faintly. "I was wondering if you'd come." Emily held up the bag. "Just a few things. For you, and maybe the puppies." Granny Lin stepped aside. The apartment was small. One room, a kitchen corner, and a narrow balcony overlooking a tangle of alleyways and rooftops. On a folded blanket near the window, the puppies were sleeping in a tight little pile, warm under the sun. Emily's eyes softened. "They're so peaceful." "They always are after visiting her," Granny Lin said. "They sleep better, longer, I think. They remember her scent, her warmth. It calms them." Emily sat down carefully. "Can I ask, how did it start? I mean, your connection with her?" Granny Lin settled into a chair with a soft sigh, her hands folded in her lap. "I suppose it began the way most things begin, by accident. I was walking through the old neighbourhood last winter. It was already half torn down. The people were gone, the buildings like bones. I was bringing food to a stray cat I'd been feeding when I saw her." "The dog?" Granny Lin nodded. Thin, cold, limping. She was digging through rubble for scraps. But what struck me most were her eyes. Not wild, not broken, just wary, like someone who'd been betrayed too many times. "She was alone then?" "Yes, no puppies, not yet. I left food for her. She didn't come close, but I knew she saw me. I returned the next day, and the next. She never touched the food until I was far away, but she came, always." Granny Lin looked toward the puppies. One stirred and let out a soft yawn. "Then one day she disappeared," she continued. "I searched everywhere. I thought she might have died or been taken. But weeks later I found her behind an old trailer, barely sheltered, ribs showing, curled around 6 newborns." Emily felt her breath catch. "She let me watch from a distance. But if I stepped closer, she growled. I didn't blame her. She'd been hurt too many times. People had thrown stones at her. One man beat her with a plank just to get her off his property. She had every reason to hate us. And the puppies? They were so tiny, helpless. She barely moved, even when it rained. I brought her blankets, food, anything I could carry. I talked to her even when she wouldn't look at me. And for a while, that was enough." Granny Lin's gaze dropped, but then the demolition team returned. The trailer was marked for removal. They didn't care about her or her babies. I begged them to wait. They told me to get lost. So I took the puppies while she was out looking for food. I hid nearby, hoping she'd follow. Did she? No. She ran when she saw me, and I couldn't chase her. Not with the little ones crying in my arms. Emily swallowed hard. "So you started visiting her?" Granny Lin nodded. "Every day. I took them back to her, let them nurse, cuddle, then brought them home again before nightfall. It must be exhausting." "It is," she said, smiling, "but so is love." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft breathing of the pups. One of them stirred, rolled over, and found its sibling's ear to chew on. Emily broke the silence. "She doesn't trust anyone but you. I'm not sure she even trusts me, not completely. But she doesn't run anymore. She waits." Granny Lin's voice grew quieter. "I think she knows I'll come." Emily stood slowly, her voice steady. "You did something extraordinary. You reached her when no one else could." "I didn't reach her," Granny Lin said. "Her love for her babies did. I just made space for it." That night, Emily wrote about the day's conversation. She shared it with her volunteer group, who passed it along to a local animal rescue blog. The post went viral. People were captivated, not just by the act, but by the consistency. The idea of an old woman carrying life in her hands every day across 10 kilometers, asking for nothing in return. Granny Lin didn't know. She didn't have a phone or computer. But Emily told her gently the next morning as they waited for the bus with 2 heavy bags and 4 wriggling puppies. "You're becoming a bit of a hero," Granny Lin chuckled. "If walking slow and talking to dogs makes me a hero, the world must be short on miracles," Emily smiled. "Or maybe it's finally noticing the quiet ones." The bus arrived. The driver tipped his cap at Granny Lin. Same route, same stop, same mission. But now, Emily realised, the story was no longer just about a stray dog or some rescued pups. It was about what happens when one person decides that no creature, no matter how frightened or forgotten, should have to go unloved. It was about devotion. And tomorrow, it would continue. The morning sun was already climbing high when Granny Lin stepped out of her building, her 2 bags swinging gently at her sides. Emily waited by the bus stop, just as she had for the past week, ready to accompany her once again. Granny Lin smiled at the sight of her. "Still curious?" she asked softly. Emily shook her head, still learning. They didn't speak much on the bus. They didn't need to. The ride had become a kind of ritual. A quiet passage through the city's layers, from the modern and loud to the neglected and silent. It was as if the world was retreating behind them with every stop. When they finally reached the cemetery, the pups, already squirming in their bags, seemed to sense the nearness of their mother. Granny Lin set the bags down on the same mossy patch beneath the old elm tree, unzipped them with a practiced hand, and released the puppies one by one. They knew what to do. With the certainty of instinct, they waddled forward, noses twitching, tails wagging. From the woods beyond, as always, came the sound of hesitant movement. Then the familiar figure appeared. Misha, the mother dog, still limping, still thin, but alert and trembling with anticipation. As the puppies squealed and clambered toward her, she let out a soft, broken whimper. Her body lowered to the ground, and the pups piled over her, nuzzling and licking and scrambling for warmth. Emily stood to the side, arms crossed, holding her breath. "She never comes close to me," she whispered. "Only to them." Granny Lin nodded. "She's still afraid. That kind of hurt takes time to unlearn." "She watches you, though," Emily said. "Yes, but she watches like someone who has been betrayed." They stayed for hours that day, longer than usual. Misha never strayed far. She nursed the puppies, licked their ears, nuzzled them close when a breeze picked up. When a bird called from a tree nearby, she jerked her head in alarm, muscles tensing, then relaxed again. Emily began to see something more than just a dog and her pups. She saw a survivor, a protector, a mother whose love endured despite every hardship. Granny Lin sat with her legs folded beneath her, watching with a quiet reverence. "This is the only time she gets to be a mother," she said, almost to herself. The words settled like dust in the air. Emily knelt beside her. "Have you ever tried bringing her back with you?" "Once," Granny Lin said. "Early on, I left the puppies in a box near the gate and stood back. When she came, I tried to coax her with food. She sniffed, then looked at me, and ran. Not because of the food, because she recognized the leash." Emily looked over. Misha was licking one of the pups, nudging it toward her belly. "She remembers being forced out," Granny Lin continued, "when they tore down her home, when they hurt her. The leash doesn't mean rescue to her, it means capture." A long silence stretched between them. "She's losing weight," Emily said. Granny Lin's expression didn't change. "Yes, she's slower too. Her leg's not healing right. Infection, maybe. We can't keep letting this go on." Granny Lin finally looked at her. "What do you suggest?" Emily hesitated, then said, "A trap, a humane one. We put the pups inside. She'll come for them. Once she's in, we take her to a vet." Granny Lin said nothing for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. "I don't like it, but I know you're right." The next day they brought the cage. It was larger than expected, placed beneath the same elm tree. Lined with soft blankets, it looked more like a cradle than a trap. Emily helped settle the puppies inside, their little noses pressed against the bars as they sniffed and whined. Then they stepped back, far back, out of sight. And they waited. It didn't take long. Misha emerged from the woods, her gait slower than usual. She stopped at the edge of the clearing and tilted her head. She could smell them, hear them. She approached cautiously. Emily and Granny Lin watched from behind a headstone, barely breathing. Misha circled the cage twice. She pawed at the ground. She sniffed the corners. She whined. The puppies cried louder. Misha lowered herself, pressing her face against the bars. The pups licked at her through the small gaps, reaching with their tiny paws. She backed away, then crept forward again. Her body tensed. She stepped one paw into the cage, then another. She paused. The puppies yelped with joy. Granny Lin gripped Emily's hand tightly. Misha stepped fully inside. The door closed with a soft but final click. The reaction was immediate. Misha spun around, eyes wide, teeth bared. She lunged against the bars, growling and barking, trying to escape. The puppies whimpered in confusion. But then, something changed. Misha stopped. She turned and saw Granny Lin, emerging slowly, steadily from behind the headstone. No rush, no threat. She approached the cage and knelt beside it. Misha growled once, then fell silent. Granny Lin placed her hand on the top of the cage and whispered something no one else could hear. Misha stared at her, not with hate, not with fear, but with a kind of exhausted surrender. And then the strangest thing happened. She lay down. Right there, inside the cage among her puppies, as if she understood, as if finally she had decided to trust. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek. She chose them, she said. Granny Lin nodded. She always would. The drive to the clinic was silent, save for the soft whimpering of the puppies nestled in a crate beside their mother. Misha sat still, her breathing rapid but measured, her eyes darting between the bars of the transport kennel and the familiar presence of Granny Lin sitting close, murmuring gentle words with every bump in the road. Emily drove, glancing in the rearview mirror more often than necessary. Her hands were tight on the steering wheel, heart still pounding from what had just happened. The trap, the latching of the door, Misha's wild thrashing, and then just as quickly, her surrender. The image of her lying down in that cage would be etched into Emily's mind forever. At the clinic, the staff had already been informed. Dr. Reyes, a quiet man with greying hair and warm hands, met them at the back entrance to avoid the chaos of the waiting room. He approached slowly, crouching beside the kennel and speaking in low tones. "She's in pain," he said, observing Misha's posture. "We'll need to sedate her to properly assess the injury." Granny Lin nodded, her hand resting on the kennel's frame. "Be kind." "She's lucky to have you," Dr. Reyes said before gently lifting the cage and carrying it inside. The puppies were placed in a separate holding area with blankets, water and a heating pad. Emily watched as one of them stumbled forward, yawned, then curled up again. They were oblivious to the tension that gripped the adults in the room. Dr. Reyes returned after 30 minutes. "The leg is fractured in 2 places," he said. "It's old, likely from blunt trauma. She's been walking on it too long without treatment. There's some infection, but we can save it." Granny Lin closed her eyes, relief softening her face. "She'll need surgery," he continued. "Pins, antibiotics, a long recovery. But yes, she'll walk again." Emily let out a long breath. "She'll be out for a while," Dr. Reyes added. "Would you like to see her?" Granny Lin didn't answer. She simply stood and followed him down the hall. In the dim light of the recovery room, Misha lay on her side, eyes closed, chest rising and falling slowly. An IV ran into her front leg. The gash along her rear limb had been cleaned and wrapped. She looked peaceful, like a creature finally at rest. Granny Lin sat beside her, took a wrinkled tissue from her coat pocket and dabbed her eyes. "You did good," she whispered. "You did what you had to do." Dr. Reyes left them alone. Later, Emily found her standing by the kennel of the puppies, watching them sleep. She didn't speak at first, just stood with her arms crossed, jaw clenched. "She'll need a place to recover," Dr. Reyes had said earlier. "Somewhere quiet, safe." Emily repeated that to Granny Lin. "I can't carry her up all those stairs," she replied quietly. "Not with my knees." "You won't have to." Emily hesitated. "There's a couple from the shelter. They've got a little house, fenced yard, quiet neighbours. They've agreed to foster her, just until she's stronger." Granny Lin looked at her sharply. "She's not going to be taken from you," Emily said quickly. "They just want to help. You can visit every day, bring the pups, stay as long as you want, but Misha needs space." Granny Lin looked away. "I just got her to trust me," she murmured. "You still have her trust," Emily said, "and now you can give her something she's never had before, rest." They were quiet again. Granny Lin finally nodded. "She deserves that much." The next day, Misha was transferred to the foster home. Granny Lin visited every morning. She brought warm food, blankets, sometimes just her voice. Misha greeted her with a soft wag of her tail and a slow blink of recognition. The puppies, still too young to be adopted, remained with Granny Lin. Her small apartment was crowded now, blankets on every surface, squeaky toys underfoot, but filled with a kind of life that made the space feel larger. She spoke to them often, told them stories. Sometimes she'd glance at a photograph taped to the wall, faded, old, a much younger version of herself holding a different dog. She never said the dog's name, but she touched the photo each morning before picking up the food bowls. Emily visited often. Sometimes she brought groceries, sometimes she brought news. One morning she arrived with a letter. "It's from a journalist," she said. "She read the blog post, wants to write about you." Granny Lin shook her head. "No one needs to know. She thinks people should. I didn't do it for attention. I know, but others might learn from it." Granny Lin looked down at the pups, one of whom was gnawing gently on the toe of her slipper. "I just wanted them to stay together." Emily smiled. "That's the part worth telling." Eventually, the story ran in a local paper. Then a national site picked it up. People donated supplies, money, blankets, offers to adopt flooded in, but Emily and the shelter carefully screened each one. Misha recovered quickly. Her limp never fully vanished, but the pain was gone. She began playing again, barking softly when the puppies arrived, licking their ears and curling around them like she had before. And slowly, day by day, Granny Lin began to believe what others had started calling her: a rescuer, a guardian, a quiet force of love. Not because she saved a dog, but because she refused to let anyone, man or animal, be left behind. The leaves had just begun to turn when Misha finally returned to Granny Lin's apartment, not as a foster, not as a guest, but as family. The vet had given the all-clear weeks earlier, her recovery deemed nothing short of remarkable. Though she still carried a slight limp, there was strength in her stride now, and trust in her eyes that had once known only betrayal. Granny Lin prepared everything for the homecoming. She rearranged the furniture to make room for a large bed near the window where the sunlight poured in during the afternoons. Bowls were set beside the kitchen counter. Toys were scattered throughout the room, worn from use but still loved. And in the corner the puppies, now lively, noisy and full of mischief, waited. When Misha walked through the door, the apartment erupted with sound. The pups lunged forward in a flurry of paws and tails. Misha barked once, a low, soft sound that seemed almost like laughter, and dropped to the floor, letting her children pile on top of her. Granny Lin stood by the door, one hand on her chest, smiling so wide her eyes disappeared into soft lines. It had been weeks since that day in the cemetery, the moment everything changed. Now the pain was a memory, the fear a shadow. In its place was something quieter, deeper, peace. Emily visited that evening with a small celebration cake and a framed photograph she had taken at the foster home. Misha, surrounded by her puppies in the grass, ears flopping, tongues out, a portrait of survival. "We should hang this," she said. Granny Lin placed it above the mantel. "They look so free," she murmured. "They are," Emily replied. "Thanks to you." But Granny Lin shook her head. Thanks to her. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Morning walks in the alley, afternoon naps by the window, grocery trips with puppies in tow, causing smiles from strangers and invitations from neighbours. People began to recognise her. She became the dog grandma of the block. Children waved, bakery staff saved scraps, a mailman left treats on the stoop. Still, Granny Lin remained modest. She said little when people asked about the story. She let them guess, let them wonder. She preferred it that way. But at night, when the apartment grew quiet, and the puppies were asleep, and Misha lay curled beside her bed, she would reach for her old notebook. Not to write. Her hands were too stiff now, but to trace the spine. A habit born from years of recording memories no one else would ever read. One evening, as autumn leaned into winter, Emily returned with news. "A shelter upstate read the article," she said. "They want to name a room after you, for senior dogs and their caregivers." Granny Lin blinked. "That's too much. It's not enough." She looked over at Misha, who was grooming one of the pups with slow, loving licks. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know. That's why it matters." The next morning, Emily brought a videographer. Granny Lin was hesitant, but eventually agreed, as long as Misha and the pups were the focus. They filmed her walking down the street, pups bouncing beside her, They recorded her feeding them, talking to them, brushing Misha's fur with deliberate, gentle strokes. She told the story plainly, without dramatics. Just facts, just truth. I only ever wanted to keep a promise, she said, that no mother should lose her children, that no child should be left alone. The video was posted online. It spread. People from across the country, then from across the ocean, wrote in. Letters, emails, donations, artwork. Some said they cried. Others said they adopted a senior dog because of her. A few said her quiet strength reminded them of someone they loved and lost. One letter, handwritten and fragile, came from a girl in hospice care. It said, "Dear Granny Lin, I watched your video with my dog Molly. I'm not scared anymore. You make me believe love stays with us, even when we're gone." Granny Lin read it twice. Then she wept. Not from sadness, but from the simple, overwhelming truth that something as small as carrying 2 bags on a bus could ripple so far, so wide. The pups grew quickly. Some were adopted by close friends of the shelter. Others stayed with Granny Lin. Misha remained the matriarch, still protective, still patient. Her leg never fully healed, but she moved with pride. Winter came, and with its snow, Granny Lin bought them all sweaters, hand-knitted by a neighbour. Emily brought booties, which the pups hated, but tolerated. They spent Christmas together. A small tree, too many chew toys. Granny Lin cooked rice and boiled chicken. Emily brought pie. Misha sat with a ribbon around her neck, blinking slowly as if to say, "Yes, this is good." After dinner, Granny Lin sat by the window. The snow fell outside in slow flakes. The pups dozed in a warm pile near the radiator. Misha lay at her feet. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "They saved me, you know. I thought I was done with life. Just days moving past. But then I saw her, shaking in the cold, trying to feed her babies, and I remembered what it meant to try again." Emily didn't say anything. She just reached over and held her hand. That night, Granny Lin wrote one final line in her notebook, the only one in months. "Love, when quiet, is often the loudest miracle of all." And the next day, life continued. The walks, the bus rides, the stories passed from one neighbour to another, growing not with embellishment but with awe. Granny Lin's story wasn't about heroism. It was about presence, about choosing to stay, to carry love in 2 bags down 10 kilometres of silence through the hardest winters toward a clearing where forgiveness waited in the eyes of a dog who had every reason not to trust, and doing it every single day, until trust became love, and love became home.